So 2 reasons that I have a slideshow. One is to obviously show you all some evidence that we've gathered, some video, photographs, but also it helps keep me on task because I love everything that I do and I could easily talk to you for probably 4 hours. I have some familiar faces here. They know it. They know it. They come to a lot of my events. So I'm going to kind of go through a little bit of like a timeline and try to get as much as I can in. I have found that this has been about an hour and a half lecture, and people end up having a lot of questions. So I try to kind of go through it a little bit at a time. I can't really bring you into my whole life in a matter of an hour and a half. But a couple things about me. I am, as you can see, I am a paranormal and spiritual event host. The paranormal world, being a medium, is my full-time job. It's my life. And I host many paranormal events that I invite the public to come to for people to understand the realm of spirits. And many people are drawn to the paranormal for the same reasons that you are all drawn here. There's curiosity. Many of us are familiar with the feeling of, ooh, what is the supernatural about? What are some of the experiences that people have? The whole TV network now has gone crazy with ghost shows. But when I was growing up, there really weren't that many. I probably aged myself, but In Search Of was like my favorite show when I was a kid. And I think it was really the only show that kind of touched base a little bit on all these topics. So I have used my mediumship abilities in all areas. I do spirit galleries where I'll deliver messages in people's homes to a group and as well as businesses, as well as the events. I do readings, private readings, public readings. You can find all of this on my website. I did bring my business cards. You're welcome to take. You'll find a lot on there. The other thing that I'll just say quickly too is in depth about me, wanting to know more about me personally in all of my views. This isn't a sales pitch, but I started to write my spirit adventure books. And those books you can also find on my website. You can also find them on Amazon. They're books that are a series, and I share all of my cases, all of my interactions with spirit. Everything about me is in there. So that, be done with that. I have to get used to this little thing here. Okay. So where did all this really begin for me and why I'm standing here today? Really had everything to do with believing in your own magic, me believing in myself. I have been a medium my whole life. It isn't something that I pulled out a book and learned how to do. I didn't take classes or courses to really help develop it. My mediumship is something that I have learned to deal with and understand through physically using it. I do teach mediumship, and it's something that you can't really teach people to be, but you can help teach and bring out what's already there in people. And a lot of that is through use. The first story that my mom tells of me in my medium ways, and we often call them my Karenisms. How many of you have watched the show Friends? Oh, people. So in my family growing up, I was Phoebe. Everybody kind of like, you know, silly Karen, or the oddball in my family. My parents were not into paranormal or the spiritual world. So for me, I was really kind of on my own. It's very different for my children, but for me, I was really on my own. I was 2 years old. My parents lived in a duplex, and the owner lived on one side, they lived on the other. And the landlord kept coming over talking about the smoke that was around the house. And he was assuming that my parents were smokers, and he kept coming over to tell them that they needed to knock it off or he was going to evict them. And then, whoop. There we go.
Thank you. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. So he came over the last time basically to say you need to you guys are going to pack up and move out of here, because there was smoke that was completely filling the his side of the apartment. I was 2, not too much language, sitting on the floor, playing with my toys, the blanket. And my mom said that I looked at the landlord and I pointed to the corner of the room and told them that there was a man that was standing in the room. And to some, I mean, I don't remember this, but I described what this man looked like. And the landlord was freaking out because it was his grandfather. So that was my mom's kind of first inclination that something was up. In most of my childhood, that's a similar story. Waking up with spirits in my room, for being a little kid, it was very frightening for me, but that was my, I guess, knowings of being a medium. As a child, it was very natural. It was very normal for me. It was my imaginary friends, and that was completely fine for many years. My first personal experience that I can remember was when I was either around 7 or 8. I was sitting in the living room of our house. We had this long ranch. The living room was right in the center. My room was on the end of the hall. You had to walk down this spooky hallway to get to my bedroom on the end. I was watching TV one night. The house, I don't know where everybody was, but the house was pretty dark and quiet. And I was drawn to go to my room. So I made my way, and as I got closer to my door, it was ajar, and it was glowing, like there was light coming out of my room. And I remember this very clearly, like it was yesterday. That's odd. I nudged the door open, and standing there was this huge, large, to me, an angelic being, glowing, long hair, looked like a woman, just standing there, huge, and like covered the entire doorway, just looking at me. And I had this feeling of, hi, like, oh, it's you again. There was a familiar feeling about the presence of this energy. So here I am, I'm 7 or 8, and I just looked at her and smiled and went back to watching TV. That is natural for me. That was what my childhood was like. It was just a very natural thing. Until you fast forward to the time where many of you, I'm sure, The Exorcist, The Omen, the Amityville Horror. I was 12 years old when I saw The Exorcist. So you can tell that all of my embracing of myself went, no way, I'm not listening to spirits. I'm not going to have that happen to me. And that's what I mean about growing up without having libraries, without having technology to understand abilities. So as a kid at that age, with all those shows coming out, I was scared and I shut it all down as much as I could. And then life got busy, mom, all those things. But as time went on, I had those nudging from spirit and from myself to understand the in-between from spirituality and religion and paranormal and the mysteries and what's all in between. That many of you probably also have that. Why do I see colors around people? Why do I have knowings? Why do I have these feelings? Why do I actually hear someone talking to me or seeing things? So I had like this whole time period in my life that I got tired of just brushing it aside. And at that time, I decided to become who I am and fully embrace. So what is a medium? What does that mean, being a medium? So here I am standing in front of you, and all of my energy, many of you might call it your aura that's around you. We all have that. Every thought, feeling, emotion, experience that I have, just imagine it being like little bubbles that are all around me. She may have sensitive abilities. And if I walk up next to her, she may feel some of those bubbles. You already do. Tag, you're it. So she may feel those. She may know, oh, she's got issues with something, or this might have happened to her, or I don't know, I'm just getting these feelings about her. We all have these abilities that start at base level when we're born. We're all very intuitive. We all have natural abilities that we're born with. And they either get squashed as time goes on or they get developed, depending on your knowledge, your environment, your family. A lot of the people around you can either help that or they can squash that. We all know that in our regular life with anything we have going on. That's kind of like base level. Psychic ability takes a little bit farther of where she has psychic ability and I'm around her. She just naturally can pull those bubbles, not just like, oh, I'm getting this feeling. She can seek those bubbles out and pull them and know things. A medium is at the highest level. And a medium has the ability to be a direct communicational person with spirits on the other side. Mediums have the ability to talk to spirits, but they also have the ability to have all of the lower things, the psychic abilities, empath abilities, just your normal intuitive abilities. All the senses become more. And the reason why I explain this is because a lot of people don't necessarily know exactly what a medium is. So all that information that's coming is coming from a spirit on the other side. A lot of people ask me this, and this is just kind of like brief things to some degree before I get into showing you all the other stuff. Because a lot of people, well, how do you do readings? How can you do readings remotely? How can you have spirits visiting you remotely? Because I'm a medium. I don't need to be around you. I don't even need to see you. I don't even really need to know your name, although it helps to at least know your first name in order to tell you what's around you, because I'm talking to somebody that's there. So that's what a medium is. I do believe that mediumship is something that a lot of people ask us, can you teach it? Can you become a medium? I don't think that you can. I think you can develop a lot of your abilities, but I think true mediumship is something, I don't know how it works. I wish somebody did a science and really studied it, but that's what mediums are. I feel like I want to move, but I can't. I'm stuck to this part. So ghosts, spirits, residual energy, what is it? Everything that I talk about today, everything that I show you, again, is coming from me in my experience. I spend probably 90% of my week talking to the other side. That's where all of my insight and wisdom comes from. This is just an example of my synopsis of what a ghost is, what a spirit is, what residual energy is. I call ghosts being more earthbound spirits. So for instance, if, here we are in this grand library, if there are energies that are residing here and mainly reside here, they don't travel to the neighbor's yard, they don't go downtown, they don't hitch a hike with somebody else, they tend to stay in this area. Oftentimes it might be where they pass, they might have a really strong connection to the property, the building, something is keeping them there. Oftentimes that's how I refer to a ghost. Someone who's very earthbound. They've shed their body, but they haven't fully transcended into spirit. They're stuck in their belief systems. They're stuck in tragedy or whatever it is that holds them in an area. And oftentimes you will see, you hear the story of you drive by a house and there's the old lady that sits up in the chair, looking out the window, and she's there all the time. That's an example of more so what a ghost, I'll say ghost mentality is. Spirits are the same thing. They're all people that lived a life, but now spirits, they've let go of that life. They don't forget, but they've let go of that life and they're transcending higher. They've now gone into their spirit form. And that oftentimes they go everywhere. Past loved ones are popping in to say hello, but they're also visiting, Aunt Susan over here and somebody else, as well as there's a whole other plethora of other spirits, human spirits, angelic beings, higher energies, extraterrestrial, other things that are beyond this world. But that's to give you a little bit of example of what a ghost is and what a spirit is. You have to remember too, we all got in the car and we came here. You made a choice to come here tonight. Spirits do the same. They travel everywhere. They're with people all the time. They go everywhere. Very telepathic. They want to be someplace, they'll be there. Residual energy is what I classify as energy that kind of gets trapped in a place, building, material, wood, oftentimes. Like if there's a fire that happens in a building, oftentimes we can debunk that because you don't realize it, but wood actually stores a lot of scent in it, and that can be residual energy. Something violent happened in this room and everybody leaves. People who are sensitive may feel that residual energy. It's not a spirit, but it's the energy that's there. You hear the stories of you go to the train tracks and sometimes you'll hear the train go through, but there really isn't a train. Sometimes that's residual energy that's kind of just looping in there. So that's kind of the difference. But in general, most spirits, ghosts are people, they're human beings, just at different levels of after they pass. So where did all of this kind of really begin for me? That explains why I'm standing here and talking to you guys. In 2009, I just kept having that nudge of trying to understand exactly my abilities. What am I supposed to be doing with this? Why is this happening to me? To be honest with you, I was getting tired of spirits visiting me without understanding why. So I started a digital magazine called The Mirror Magazine. It never made me any money and it never was successful, but it opened a lot of doors for me. And it was a place that I could play with my two talents, my two passions, writing and imagination. That was always my thing. I always felt at home writing and talking to spirits and being outside in nature. So I decided to write about it. And I did this digital magazine and I would interview people. I would talk about different things, paranormal investigations. And I decided that I needed to go to a haunted hotel. Because if I'm going to write about paranormal stuff, now mind you, this is when I wasn't really embracing this at all. I have to go to a place where the spirits are. Be like, if you want to learn baseball, you're not going to go to a football stadium. You got to go to a baseball field. You got to have a bat in your hand. You have to have a ball in your hand. So I'm like, okay, I'm going there. So one of the guys that I had interviewed in one of my articles, his name was Ron, and he had gone to the Shanley Hotel, which is in Napanoch, New York. It's way out in the middle of nowhere. It's 4 hours from Antrim. I don't know how long it would be from here, probably 5, but it's out in nowhere. And he had made a comment on Facebook about it being the real deal. So I reached out to him, asked him his opinion. He said, you need to go there. I started to hem and haw about it. I don't know, maybe I don't know if I should or shouldn't. And one day I opened up my laptop, went on Facebook, and I had a message from Ron. And here was this old clipping in our feed of the Shanley Hotel. And it was just this, I could barely read it, but I'm like, okay, that's got to be a sign. I got to go. So I messaged him. I'm like, hey, Ron, thanks. I made up my mind. I called the owner. I'm going to stay at the hotel. I'm going to interview him. I'm going to write about it. And he's like, Karen, I didn't send you an article. And I'm like, you didn't? He's like, no. I felt like that hotel was calling me. There was a reason for me to go. The Shanley Hotel, as you can see, is it pretty much still looks the same on the outside. It's a very rundown 1800. Mr. James Shanley was an Irishman, built the hotel. It was very grand, but it was falling apart. Sal was the owner. He purchased the hotel originally to fix it up and sell it. And then when he began to do renovations on it, he realized how haunted it really was. There are 33 known spirits that are there that can all be documented and their stories told, except the one that I connected with that night. It was a plethora of experiences for me. I walked in the door and all of my abilities that I had put silent were like in my face. I could see people, I could hear people talking. I had a ton of experiences. But it was one of the rooms upstairs, which was technically the bordello. And it's a small little room, kind of in an attic area. I was sitting in a room and I had this overwhelming sorrow and I started to cry and I felt awful. And I saw this woman present to me. She had long red hair, green eyes. She was very sad. She didn't want to be there anymore. This whole story I write about in my books. It's the first chapter of all my books because it's a long, profound story and I could take up an hour just talking about that. That experience though changed everything for me because when I went home, she came home with me. And for 8 months, I had an attachment of this woman who didn't want to go back to the hotel and she was murdered there. Sal and I went through this. I'd call him up. I'm like, oh my God, I'm freaking out. I'm like, this woman's talking to me. I documented everything. And he and I went on the journey of trying to validate who she was. All that the Shanley knew was that up in this particular area, they would hear the name Marguerite being yelled by a man, but nobody knew. And it took Sal and I years. And finally he met a woman, an elderly lady who was still alive, who could place Marguerite being in that hotel, and she remembered her. And that's where I got the validation that this woman that was with me was a real person. And that began the journey. Helping her leave and move on in spirit triggered something in me to host events because I felt that people needed to understand and experience this. This is in the bordello. And one of the things that happens in the bordello all the time is this mist that shows up. It doesn't matter where you are up there, but it shows up. And you will see in the picture, well, this feels like weird not doing it this way, but right in here, you can see the dresser. See how clearly the dresser is? Can you see my finger? Oh, you can't. Okay, right here. So the dresser is right there. This picture is taken in like this little entryway that's like a sitting area, and then there's a bed, and then there's 3 rooms that are off of this little entryway. So we're taking a picture into one of the rooms. And then if you look on this one, there's a cloud all covering the dresser, completely covering it out.
Oh, I see.
Do you see it?
Oh, I knew it was in the mirror. I just couldn't tell where it was.
Here is another example.
Yep.
This is a room next to it. This is Rosie's room. And you'll see in the first picture, it's clear. In the second picture, there's the white mist all on the side. All of my pictures, we always take multiple pictures. We try to take pictures around an experience. If somebody's feeling something, we take pictures. The other thing, at this particular time, it's been difficult to stay on it now, but I would try to get pictures from people. Like, we'll look at them that night before everybody goes home, and it's like, give them to me now. Because that way I know they're not being doctored. And I'm not getting like somebody sending them to me later. So I know everything I'm going to show you is pretty valid. So this is in the bordello. This is Rosie's room. Now, Rosie is a very regular spirit at the Shanley. This is her. The bordello originally, before it was a bordello, was the barber's little apartment area for Mr. Shanley. He was very wealthy and had his own barber, and the family lived there. When Rosie was 2 years old, she wandered off on the property and she fell in the well and she passed. She is a very strong presence at the Shanley. And she loves to interact with people. She can be very shy and quiet. She's very selective on who she'll entertain, but when she does, this is often what, excuse me, she will do. So this toy, she loves anything that lights up and plays music. This is a very interactive toy. You have to touch it in order for it to go off. Oh, there's no sound. Which is not a huge big deal, but Katie's in the room and you'll see Katie's kind of talking and she's like trying to get, to see if it's like the air conditioner or, how do you make this sound?
Great question. Freaking me out though. Yeah,
Oh, it's on.
but I think the sharing is the problem.
Oh, actually, we will need that because
For
the
something
EVPs,
else.
they won't hear.
Yeah, we want to hear.
And now, technical break.
I think the sound is off, actually. If you see
Oh,
that,
yeah, on the actual.
day.
Yeah.
All right, here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
You're brilliant.
That would probably help if that was on, I feel like.
Glasses. I don't know if that's gonna work.
Okay, now.
Yeah, so back up here.
Okay.
Happy. All right. Oh, hold on. I'm gonna.
Too far.
There we go. Watch. Happy.
She's gonna explain it.
I don't think so. So this video goes on for a long time, but you can see she's activating the and it's not something that if you push the bed, I mean, if you push it hard enough, it would go on. So you came out from under the bed. So you have been shy. We knew you were in here.
Okay.
Yeah. Did somebody say Anna? So here's another video. Hopefully this one will load too. From the Shanley, and it's one of the devices that we use, which is called an SLS. And so, does anybody know what an SLS is? Okay, just a few. So back in several years ago, the Xbox Kinect has the sensor bar, and they started to realize that spirits were showing up while people were playing that were not in the room because it shows stick figures. So of course the paranormal community got on board and started to design this equipment. For us paranormal people, it was like $1,500. Remember when laptop or computer was like $2,500 to have a basic computer? That's kind of what happened with the SLS. They charged an outrageous amount. So I went through my son's old things that he wasn't playing with anymore, and we learned how to create the SLS and figure it out. So what it does though is it shows you, and it's great for investigating because oftentimes as a medium, people can't see what I'm seeing. So we'll use devices so that you can see who we're talking to or have some, being a part of it. I'll use dowsing rods a lot. And the SLS is great because you have the figure. Many people will be sensing that spirit, talking to that spirit. There it is in the room, and it'll present as the stick figure. This woman was great because she was so interactive with us. Katie's standing in the room and she's holding her hand up, and we're asking the spirit to touch her hand, and you will see the figure come down and actually touch her hand. Reach down and touch Katie's hand. Okay, can you reach down and touch Katie's hand? Can you reach down with your arm? So can you see Katie's hand? Then she'll end up bringing it up higher. She's raising her arms up. Okay, can you raise your hand? She just touched your hand. Just touched your hand.
That's awesome. When she go off the ginger, because it's dark, so.
Thank you. Can you put your hand back up? Can you raise your hand back up?
I'm still thinking.
She's still holding your hand. Katie's feeling her hand being touched. And it almost looks like she comes down to hug her. Okay, so well, she's kind of bent down a little bit towards you. I've got mine going. This I don't have set yet to record. I don't have that program set in it. So yeah, she's all around your hand now. So this goes on for quite a while. All around your arm.
Yeah, I can definitely.
And then later. Yeah, she was. After, when she kind of goes away, you'll see the see it swaying. Now nobody is upstairs. We're all in that room, and you'll see the lamp kind of swaying from where she was, which was really cool. That was a great night. But that's an example of one of the tools that we use. So how do I get it to go to the next slide now? Okay. So this is Sal. So Napanoch, New York is a haul from my house, and I was going there once a month for a while to help Sal with events. He became a very huge mentor to me. Like I said, when I went to the Shanley, this is in 2000, this would have been actually in 2010 when I went. That's where everything really happened, and I began to embrace it all. And oftentimes I would call Sal as my own validation, and he really helped me through a lot. Unfortunately, Sal ended up passing away, and he haunts his own hotel. He's not stuck there, but he does go periodically. The current owner really saved the hotel from somebody else taking it over. And whenever I am there, Sal will come out. It happens almost every time that I go. Some of the people he was close with, he will visit. So this is an EVP of Sal talking to me. I could sense him in the room. We're talking to it. We're kind of identifying another spirit, and you'll hear him say, "Hello, Karen." What do you look like? You hear him? "Hello, Karen."
That was a strong one too. I was about to say, I was like, I've heard EVPs, but
Yeah.
not that strong.
That's Sal.
It's been a while.
And it had been a while since I had been. And then afterwards, I left the room and cried because it was a very touching connection with him. So that was the Shanley, which then brings me to the Conjuring House. So how many of you have watched the movie? Have you been there? How many watched the movie?
The movie is not.
Oh my gosh, only a few. Okay. So
Oh, I feel it.
the Conjuring House, the movie truly is probably one of the best depictions of what a typical ghost story, scary movie. It's a great scary movie. However, it's not fully real. It is a Hollywood movie. This has happened in the paranormal field now a lot more than I like. And it's actually been quite embarrassing, and has been very frustrating for many of us in the paranormal field because it's become sensationalized. It's a great horror movie. I came to the Conjuring house 6 months after. So so for those of you that don't know about it, it's about a family that moved into 5 girls, parents and 5 girls that moved into a Rhode Island farmhouse and lived there for 10 years. And it turned out to be a horrific experience for them. And they went through this whole, 10 years of what Hollywood portrayed as hell for them, with demonic energies in there, possession, the whole gamut of a typical horror movie. A lot of the experiences that the family actually had were true, were very true. It just, everything else got kind of amplified about it. When a young couple in the paranormal field bought the house and really had beautiful intentions, I admired them both because they wanted to open up the doors back to the beginning. They wanted to allow people to come and experience the house for themselves, to experience the spirits themselves, and to also for education, and really had an authenticness about them in their cause. I went there 6 months after they bought it and was the first person to begin running public events at the house. And I brought, for 3 years, we were there a lot. For 2 years, I think I was there almost every weekend. Or not every week, I mean, once a month I was there a lot. A couple months I was there quite a few times because everybody wanted to go to the Conjuring house. The Conjuring house was a whole nother chapter for me. First of all, driving to this beautiful 1771. I'm looking at you because all of a sudden I lost the day. I think it's 1771. I don't remember now. But something, I think it's around 1771. This kind of original farmhouse, very quaint. It's got this, it's beautiful. It's very beautiful. And as I'm driving there, which is a normal thing for me, I already have the presence of a spirit that's with me in the car. This woman presents with this little boy about 20 minutes down the road. She's a beautiful lady, dressed in this beautiful long dress, buttons that went all the way up. And she always presents to me in this young version, this beautiful woman. Her hair's all up. And over time, I learned who she was. And her name was Bathsheba Sherman. And she would use the dowsing rods and she would spell her name. And I began to really connect with her story. Now, this picture is not really Bathsheba Sherman. There's a lot of controversy to finding the correct picture of her, but how she presents to me is a lot like this. Different dress, but very similar look. This is how the movie portrayed Bathsheba Sherman. So this is what Hollywood has done to this woman. She actually was a very prominent person. Her family, the Shermans in Rhode Island, there's a lot of history. They owned all the land in that area. There was a lot of ties to deeds that potentially indicated that the land that the house sits on may have been taken from the Sherman family. Back then you leased and you sold chickens and your rent was this, that, and whatever. There's a lot of controversy as to why Bathsheba Sherman haunts the house. The movie portrayed her as being a demon and that she was a witch and she sacrificed a child in her care. And they went through this whole plethora, and that she possessed the mother and was violently abusing the kids. The thing about Bathsheba Sherman, and the reason I'm showing this picture, is in the movie, she's sitting up on this, it's not a dresser, armoire? Armoire wardrobe closet. She's on top of it, and she flies across the room and she attacks one of the young girls in the middle of the night. They wake up screaming. The reason I show this is because Bathsheba Sherman actually has, I feel, 2 personalities with her. She presents as this loving woman just like this. And then she also presents, because she lived to be an elderly lady, a very old lady. I feel later on in her life, she became very angry. She had reasons to be. And not so nice. So we're at the house. It was about this distance. And I'm standing, whenever I have a group there, I usually will start the communications and I'll use my dowsing rods. And there's a group of ladies that were standing about this distance in the back of the room. And my daughter is sitting over here, and Bathsheba's right on my back. And she's talking to me, and I'm telling everybody what she's saying, and I'm using the rods to show what she's saying. And the woman in the back calls her batshit crazy. She says, she's got to be batshit crazy. And Bathsheba flew, just like in the movie. That's one thing that's really, really real. She flew. Her energy went right across the room. You could feel the cold path, went right to that lady. And the lady, with everyone standing around her, were like, oh my God, what is going on? I'm like, well, I just really insulted her. They could feel her. They could sense her. She apologized, but she has a side of her that has been known to want to attack people at the house. I had a fellow investigator who had the experience of physically attacking a woman during one of his events. I've had it happen a couple times with me. I've not attacked somebody, but I've had people in front of me that I have felt that desire to rip their hair out. So she has definitely two sides to her. And depending on who you are in the evening, which one you're going to get, I don't know. But the sad thing about it is that Hollywood has totally destroyed this woman's name. To this date, her gravestone can never be erected. It's knocked down, it's vandalized. She can never have a stone put up. It's been very sad what happened with this lady. So at the Conjuring House, one of the other experiences there is it is the very first location. It's definitely haunted, but it's very mild to some degree, depending on the people that are there. One evening, I had the experience of seeing, so in this room, which is the library, which is one of the most active rooms, I have a fellow medium that's standing. There's a kind of a group of us that all have sensitive abilities in the room. And this is Jeremy. He's standing across from me. You'll see my tech guy, Daniel, kind of comes in and out of the room. There are some people that are upstairs. There's kind of people a little bit everywhere in the house. And I'm seeing this really big, dark shadow coming in from the door behind Jeremy. And I'm knowing that this is not a man, this is not a woman, and I couldn't quite identify what this was. I could hear it talking to me. I could hear it in a man's voice, and it was a very sinister kind of laughing and playing with us that night. And it proceeded to tell me many things, that it was never in a human body, that it is from our galaxy, but that it is not related to the house, that it comes through the water. You guys are gonna think I'm crazy, but it told me that it comes from the water. And it immediately made me think of, you know, trees have intelligence, everything, we're all connected in some way. So maybe water is potentially manifesting into something, I don't know. But the thing that it said to me that I still to this day always am a little guarded, I'll be whatever you want me to be, is what it said. That was spooky. This night, it had the power to manipulate all of the lights in the house differently. So you will see this. It made the lights in the library go out while the other lights in the house were on, and then the other lights started to go off. People were screaming upstairs because it had the power to do different things. The owners were in their part of the house. They come out because they're thinking that we're playing with the electricity. But when you have an electrical problem, the lights all do the same thing. It's not the greatest video because it's on a GoPro that Jessica had, but it is pretty, it was a pretty crazy night.
I'm already
And Jeremy's starting to freak out.
No, that's what. We get you. We got you. I got that second time.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, and that lights don't do that. They do dim, you know, the heat comes on, you know, you can easily debunk that.
That one book didn't click.
But it was happening all differently throughout the house. Jeremy's this big guy. He doesn't get rattled that much. And he was like looking at me. We were both trying to figure it out, but also trying to be calm so we weren't freaking everybody out. But I'm like, to this day, I still don't really know what the energy is there. If you do go on my YouTube, I do have video of UFO that I also captured from the Conjuring House. There have been a lot of visual sightings of what people call grays on the property and in the house. So I don't know if it's an alien being. I can honestly tell you, I do not know. But I always stay guarded. So here is,
If you're gonna move it, move it. It's okay, I'll pick them up.
to watch the rods on the table.
Wow.
Kind of start to see it move.
That's what we think. There you go.
Nice, it's having some fun. Listen, I like when you put it.
It just takes me a minute to figure out how to go to the next one after. This is one of my favorite pieces of evidence. So this is Daniel, the tech guy. Daniel loves all of his gadgets.
That's a lot.
And to be honest, you don't use that many. It's like you really don't. So Daniel wanted to show me all these EVPs that he had on his laptop and was taking my attention. There is a spirit man that's standing in the corner. So it would have been over, he was standing over here and he was getting very agitated and frustrated that Daniel was taking my attention. And I could hear him talking to me. And I'm like, okay, Daniel, I'm getting frustrated with Daniel. You will see on Daniel's arm, the beginning of something kind of manifesting around his arm. He does have a tattoo, but when you look now at this picture, this is jet black all on his arm. It's on this arm in here. It's actually underneath behind. You'll see it. You can't really see it really well on this thing here, but it is blacking out all this area. And when you look at the picture, like if you look at it like, you know, like on my phone, it's thick. It's not a shadow, something. There's nothing that could cast that shadow. It actually looks like this mass that's on his hand, even down to like his fingers.
I think the worst part I've seen.
Daniel, you know, some people have had problems at the Conjuring House. People who are not emotionally super strong, people who are having some issues. Daniel was having a lot of issues with alcoholism at the time. And he had a while that he stopped investigating with us for a while because there were things that were triggered with him at the house. And there have been other people who've had similar problems. Most people don't have a problem when they're investigating, but people that are under a lot of trauma in their life, generally speaking, it's not the best time for you to be going off and doing investigations. But I truly believe that the man was trying to get him to stop by his arm to stop taking my attention. This is another one of my favorites. So we're in the basement and we're in one little room and we're talking to a little boy. And he was continually peeking around. There's like this little window. He would come up and he'd peek in the window. He'd come around the corner and peek out the door. So we went out into the hallway of the basement, which is like this long, long hall. And you will see, in this picture I actually had analyzed, you'll see the little boy, his shadow. And I thought that looks too perfect to be real. But you can see it's almost like he's peeking up behind the heater. Now you'll see the man's shadow being cast. You can see his shadow, Kevin's, being cast. But the dark figure is behind the wiring of the boiler or the heater. And I had several photographers who are really good friends that really analyzed this, blew it up, looked at it, and they validated that there's no way that is a shadow from anything in the room. And the way that it's placed there is pretty authentic. The thing with pictures or video evidence is when there's an experience that happens around the picture, generally it's more real. But the thing with spirit communication is sometimes things are meant just for you. You could have two people in a room and she may have an experience and see a spirit or have energy over here, and she may have like no clue. Be standing right next to each other. Sometimes spirit presents for your eyes only, for your experience. That's one of the reasons why I love having smaller groups, because we are also able to kind of help people when they're having an experience, kind of follow through with it, because it's for them to see. So physical pictures and stuff can be difficult. Like a lot of people send me things, and that's one of the first things I'll say is, were you having an experience when you took that picture? Was there some sort of feeling or emotion? Because a lot of times that in itself is more validating. This is another form of communication that we do with flashlights. And this is a different woman in the house. She is an elderly woman. She can be very stern and grumpy. Keep forgetting to put this on. So the flashlight's been going on quite a bit. See a lady in this rocking chair. She's kind of comical. I think you're having fun with us. I can see her laughing. On the older side, except I kind of have a feeling that you're on strict. You run this house. Am I correct? Flashlight goes on for yes. I get that sense of you, like you ran this house.
You know what's crazy? I can see line of somebody sitting, it's faint, but I can see something sitting in the chair. Like I can't see it on the camera, but I can faintly see a shadow.
I don't remember his name, but he could kind of see her. Was this your home? You visit? And then I click that. But that's an example. We'll set up flashlights. You turn the flashlight on if it's yes. If they're really good and they can manipulate them, we'll have a yes flashlight and a no flashlight. It usually takes a while, so it's hard to get like a good, like you'd be here for 20 minutes just on that video, because it will take them a while to do that. But flashlights are great to use. Okay. So this is the Grand Midway Hotel. And again, the Grand Midway is another one of those that's out in the middle of nowhere. It's actually about 9 hours from here. It's in Windward, Pennsylvania. Very eclectic. It's kind of a cool story. The owner, Blair, is a Los Angeles film director, and in his, I think, early 30s or late, I think it was early 30s, he decides he wants to have something different. So he goes on eBay and he finds this hotel in a coal mining town. It's a very desolate town, and he buys it for $11,000. It's a 3-story, it's massive, it's huge, very rundown. And he turned it into, I mean, some people, I don't even know how you would describe it, like a fun house, because it has, like, each room he did differently. This room is the vampire, this is the Frankenstein room, this is the vampire room. He has like Edgar Allan Poe room, he has a dragon room, a mermaid. Each room is specifically designed, and the whole entire hotel is filled with film props. He's very, he's a cool guy. But the hotel is probably one of the most haunted hotels I've ever been to. How I felt at the Shanley when I first walked in, I feel that way when I'm at the Midway. You walk in the door and it's just full. It's hard to tell because there's so many spirits there. If they're with items that are in, like he has the monkey from the Medicine Man, the movie, he has that stuffed monkey in there. There's like stuff all over the place. So is it with some of the objects? Is it with the hotel? It's a little bit of everything. This, the thing about the Grand Midway though, is there's like no internet. So I don't have a lot of footage from it. It was very difficult to get physical camera and video, but this is Joe. Joe is was a hard skeptic. His wife drags him to these things. And this weekend that we were there, it was crazy for him. We're on the second floor and you'll see Joe kind of standing there on the railing. And he started to feel very dizzy and lightheaded, losing his senses. And it's kind of a creepy picture of him because he goes from being very normal to all of a sudden his eyes get like really weird. And he felt like he was going to pass out. He had to leave. Or at least, leave the room for a while. In this picture, this is Martha. Martha is a spirit, very strong spirit at the hotel. When she was, I think, 19 years old. So this hotel, like the Shanley, was a brothel. The railroad came right through, like literally 20 feet in the tracks or right in front of the front step. It's a big coal mining town. Lots of hustle and bustle. The town is having a festival for 4th of July, fireworks display. Martha is outside standing at the balcony, looking down at the crowd. And a piece of the firework, the shrapnel came from it, or something happened and it blew up and severed her neck in front of the thousands of people that were there. And she died in front of the townspeople. Her spirit's very charming, very strong at the hotel. He's standing in the area where she often stands. You'll see lights. This is like a laser grid that's going on, but you'll actually see her touching. Her body is like right here. And he is experiencing her touching his arm. It freaked him right out. He won't go back. And he's looking because he's like, oh my God, someone's touching me. And I think it was Jim that took the picture. And you could kind of see, the thing that's kind of hard about it is you can't see it fully, but her, in the picture, she's in this like white dress. And you can kind of see like this white image of her touching his arm. And I think that one I did. The thing with the Grand Midway too, and I know I have to stay on time, is we've had a lot of experiences there with famous people. First time that I went, I can't go through the whole thing, but it's also on my YouTube. I did get to meet John F. Kennedy Jr. there. Thought I was nuts. was in a room, looking on the corner, thinking, this guy looks a lot like, I don't know about this. Small group of people with me. Started to ask him a lot of questions. He told us things that had to do with the town and specific things that his father, he was trying on the other side to right what his father had wronged. And it had to do with a dam and this community of people that a treaty apparently was taken from the Native American people in that area. And John F. Kennedy, during his presidency, broke that treaty, and it displaced, I think it was like either 600 or 900 of the townspeople. It was like a huge story. I had no insight to that. I'm just literally repeating everything he's saying. And then when we played it for the owner, because I asked him, I'm like, why the heck would John F. Kennedy Jr. be here? And he validated that in that particular area that this had happened, and everything that I was saying made sense. The other person that we met just this past visit was Anne Rice. Blair was good friends with the Rice family, and he has her entire doll collection. So she created porcelain dolls out of the likeness of her young daughter that she had lost and had an obsession with dolls. So he has her whole doll display. And Mandy, who's actually here, was my fellow person who the two of us were seeing this woman, not knowing that it was Anne Rice, in the room. And again, okay, let's figure out who this is. And lo and behold, the owner came in, and as we're talking to her and we're telling him stuff, and he would say, okay, ask her this question. And we'd ask the question, he could validate, yeah, you guys are talking to Anne Rice. And we're like, what? Seriously? Yeah. He had a good connection with her. She visits there periodically because all of her dolls are there. That was a really fun evening. So now this brings me to a private case that I was working on. This is featured on, I don't know if it's really a channel anymore, but the Bio channel. It was called My Ghost Story Caught on Camera. And this is in Fitchburg, Mass. It's episode, I think it's season 8, it's the last episode, The Mist and the Pendulum. This is a typical house that I was called to that had a lot of aggressive things happening. Obviously, your normal paranormal stuff flying off the walls and things moving, and this dark shadow would come down the stairs, through the kitchen, go down in the basement. The family was being pushed, physically scratched. They had a lot of issues. When I came to the house, there were multiple spirits that were there. One of them, was her grandfather, who owned the house. And he was a very violent man when he was living, and was a good portion of the person to blame for what was happening with them. She and her wife were going completely against his religion and culture. She married a woman. They were raising their children, a sweetheart of a person, inherited the house, and she was taking it on as her own. Her grandmother was also there. This picture, I am sitting in the kitchen entryway, and I'm feeling this presence of warmth around my arm. And I'm talking to a woman who we then identified who she was, but you'll see the green. Now this one is enhanced. My ghost story enhanced this one because it was very faint. So it's not quite that green. But in the next picture series here, when you look at this, what does it make you, like, what do you think? Like, what does that look like? This green. Is this spooky looking? It looks like a snake to me.
Like a baseball.
You know, like this one here, somebody's like, oh my God, that looks like a skeleton, like rearing up on you. So this is the homeowner. And this green mist, when people look at this, immediately everybody felt like it was something of like violent, something dark and evil. And a lot of people really get misinformed because they don't dig at it. through our investigating, this actually is her grandmother. This is how her grandmother manifests. Whenever there is tension, her grandmother was the peacekeeper in the household, was always trying to make sure everything went smoothly because it was a house of a lot of violence. And whenever Stephanie would feel tension, she would have this warmth that would come around her. And it's her grandmother. I only knew that. So when I first saw these pictures, I too came into the house assuming, like, what the hell is that? But it wasn't until I met the grandmother and I felt her warmth on my own hand that I could identify that. So sometimes too, spirits manifest in different ways. Dark shadow is not always something evil. I already told you guys about this, my books. So all my stories about my cases are in my books. So how many of you believe in angels? Okay, half and half. I didn't really fully know myself the existence of angels, obviously, other than what I've been taught and read. This is another case that was life-changing for me. Called to a house because the little girl who was around 4 had an imaginary friend, and it was beginning to freak the family out. I do not have photos of this because this is a private case. They do not mind me talking about it, but I can't really share like the identity of the house or who they are. It is in my hometown. So the parents were freaked out. Mom was pretty receptive. Dad was like, I don't know what is going on here, until it began to happen to him. So I go to the house by myself. All I know is the little girl has an imaginary friend and they don't know if it's imaginary. And I see this little boy, he's a real little boy. I look out the window and I can see him in the back and he's motioning that he came from the path in the back of the woods. So I start to follow him out there. He's real little and he's talking about that he came from back there and he had fallen and bumped his head and he was looking for his family. As a mom, it was very heartbreaking. I knew he wasn't connected to the house. Okay, I don't really know how I'm going to figure this out. I go home. I spent most of the day there and I go home and I'm cooking dinner. Now, my husband is born and raised in Antrim, New Hampshire, our town. I'm not. I didn't live in New Hampshire. I didn't grow up in New Hampshire. So he's now more accepting of this. I think this case was the tipping of the iceberg for him. So just out of curiosity, he's like, so where'd you go today? I'm like, well, I went to the Brown's house. And he was in Antrim? I'm like, yeah, I went to the Brown's house in Antrim. I said, and I don't know how I'm going to do this because Colleen was doing my research. I'm like, I'm going to have Colleen look up the whole street of the neighborhood because I told him I saw this little boy. He came from the woods. He said he bumped his head. He's looking for his family, doesn't quite know where he is. And my husband's sitting there and he's like, you went to the Brown's house? I'm like, yeah, the Brown's house. You know, repeated myself. He's got that like look. And like literally he picks up the phone, he's calling his friend. He's like, hey, Tim, do you know who used to live in the, you know, and I'm like, okay. He hangs up and he's like, you really went to the Brown's house? I'm like, yes, what's the big deal? He's like, I know that story. The story goes, it was very sensitive. Family 2 houses down from this house had a gathering. Kids are all playing. And one of the guests, little boy, just like Rosie, falls in the septic tank and passes. And it was a town tragedy for a young couple. They moved away. I had a difficult time proving the identity because I usually like to try to know exactly what I'm dealing with. And I did talk to the police officer, was not supposed to give me the information. He was heartbroken over this, tried to resuscitate the little boy. It was a really sad story. And the interesting thing about this case was the little girl in the house, her name was Rue. So what would happen is she would tell her mom things. I would tell her mom things, and the mom would validate. So the little girl truly was seeing this little boy to the point of her identifying that he lived. She took her for a stroller walk one day, and she validated that the house that Kevin, who she called the little boy, came from was 2 houses down the road. So there was a ton of validating for the family for what their daughter was experiencing, but then also for me. So here I am with this little boy as a mom, ripping my heart out, thinking, where's God and angels? And why would a child be stuck not knowing where to go? Really bothered me. Also, the fact that it was a sensitive case of where I really didn't want to talk about it with anybody because I didn't know if family members, I didn't want to dig up something that was painful for the town. I went back to the house and I sat with the little boy, and I decided that, okay, it's important for him to move on. I know that I have a Native American guide with me. I have since I was little. And there's a whole nother story of how I knew him to be. And I thought, okay, I'm going to call on him to help take this little boy where he needs to go. And then I had this knowing of that experience when I was 7 of this angelic being in my room. And I thought, okay. And I had some other experiences of people talking about angels. So I'm like, okay, I've got this little spirit boy on the floor sitting Indian style with me. And I'm talking to him about how I want him to go with my Native American man. And I'm calling on this angel that walks with me to help him find his way home. And I'm describing the little boy, what happened to him, telling him what happened to him. And he's like a bird and he has to fly higher. And I watch him leave. You know, when people talk about the other side, people who have had past near-death experiences, and they talk about the lights and the swirling, I watched the end of the hallway of this house glow and the little boy leave. And time went by. The mother calls me and she's like, Karen, do you know what your guides look like? And I'm like, well, you know, the Indian. And she said that her daughter, Rue, said that Kevin came to visit her to say goodbye to her because he was going with a soldier lady with no arms. And their dialogue back and forth was, Mommy, I think he's in trouble. And she's like, why? Well, because he smelled like poop and she was taking him away, but he wanted to say goodbye to me. So when you think of a soldier lady, Archangel Michael is often very much represented in full soldier out in armor. And angels don't have arms. The interesting thing about it was, and the fact that he died in a septic tank, and the little girl is smelling poop. So I'm like, holy shit, angels exist. Like, how would a 4-year-old girl know that I'm calling on an angel and my Indian? So that was profound for me. And it made me immediately think of when I was a little girl and seeing that being in my room. What angels are, I can't fully tell you, but I do believe that there are higher beings that are of assistance. And I call on them a lot when I'm in cases like this where I have to help a spirit leave. The little boy left. The little girl, Rue, has no memory of that time. The house is quiet and everything was good. Another little quick story to share too. These are on the lighter side. And we went from the Conjuring house to beautiful stories. This is the boy in the red cap. This is a private reading that I had. A mother came to me to have a reading. I do my readings online, so we weren't physically. She lives in a different state. And I knew her name was Judy. And I'm describing apparently what was her son. And he's presenting to me in this red baseball cap, very young. And he went on to tell me a whole bunch of, I mean, she identified, that's my son you're talking to. And he went through this whole thing. He was talking about past lives, and he was talking about soul connections and all these things. I'm thinking, okay, she's going to be like, what is this lady talking about? But, you know, he was trying to explain to his mom his life, and he was learning why he had the life that he had. As a child, he had cancer from the time he was born until the very young age that he died, which was, I think it was either 13 or 14 that he passed. He was in and out of the hospital all the time. He would have one form of cancer, recover, to have it come back. It was heartbreaking for the family. He was telling his mom that he was learning to be a guide for other children experiencing the same thing, and he was choosing that. And it was all beginning to make sense to him. And he wanted her to have comfort in knowing that that's how his life was meant to be. So we went through the reading, and, you know, she had comfort. The reading was over. Time goes by. She messages me. She decides one day she's got to go to the hospital. She has to make peace. She found herself just driving into the parking lot. Went down through the children's ward. Two of the nurses approached her and said, Judy, we have been hoping that you would come. So we couldn't talk to you because of confidentiality, but there are many children here in the ward that are dreaming of a boy in a red baseball cap that comes to them in their dreams and tells them everything's going to be okay. That still gives me goosebumps.
It's just different too.
It is beautiful. This is what often is spirit guides that often walk with people. This young boy was becoming a guide for other children. That is what we have to learn. That's the question. What do we learn from the paranormal and from spirits? Obviously, we learn who they are. You know, we learn about the Shanleys. We learn, this is another private case. We learn about Bathsheba. We learn that they are human beings. Every person in this room, that's the elephant in the room, is we're all going to pass. We're all going to enter into spirit. Do we want to be haunting someplace? Do we want to be haunting someone? What ties them here? Sometimes it's tragedy that happens. Sometimes this is as bizarre as it is. Sometimes they truly don't know that they have passed because something has happened and has thrown them out of their body. Sometimes they have things that they need to resolve. They need to figure out. Typical thing that happens in the paranormal is also the story of Rebecca Cornwell. This is another reason why it's so important to listen to the ghost stories. In 1673, this woman, I want you to imagine this old house, and she's sitting in a rocking chair. This is in Rhode Island. And she's got her quilt, and she's by the fire, which back in that time, you didn't want to leave the fireplace. It was very cold, and she was very elderly. She's in the care of her son. And her son finds her burned to death the next day. And there was a lot of speculation that she got too close to the fire and probably her blanket caught on fire, and that was her demise. And then there was also speculation of native people in the area potentially maybe came in and set her on fire. So she was buried. Time goes by, and her brother is haunted by a ghost in his room at the end of his bed. His poor dead sister is yelling about the fire to him, visiting him multiple times. The fire, solve my murder, to the point that he has her exhumed. And lo and behold, as they start to investigate and they dig into this, there are many people in town that knew that poor Rebecca was pleading for someone to help her. She was being starved by her son and daughter-in-law. She was being abused. She had ill care. She was worried. She wasn't going to leave that house though, because that was her goddamn house and she was not going to leave it. So she stayed there. But there was a lot of warning to the care of her. And in the end, it was proven that her son was the murderer of her. And he hung, and then shortly after, they determined that his wife also had a part in it. So if her spirit didn't haunt and didn't be known or present, then her murder would have been unsolved. So that's another reason a lot of times spirits are around and trying very much to have you hear their story. Just like with the Conjuring House and Bathsheba Sherman, I do feel that many of us have been a part of telling her real story and not the Hollywood story, because it's about humanity. So the last thing that I'll leave you with is I have, like I said, I do a lot of events that are open to the public for people to learn. Just come across, I'm working in collaboration with a man who bought this 1775 farmhouse in Ware, New Hampshire, that was abandoned and neglected, and actually is a settler's property of that town. It's got a lot of history. And he and I are working on bringing the farmhouse back to life. His ultimate goal is to have it be like a mini Sturbridge Village where people can come to meet the spirits and to also experience what farming in that time period was like and what it was like to live. It is original. And all the photography is by Mandy. Yeah, these are all these are your pictures.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Not that funny.
Yes. The barn. It's a really cool piece of property. It will have a lot of different events there. Pretty much like everything that I do, I will still be holding events in other locations, but this is going to be run very much as my place. I'm going to be managing it, running it. We're going to have, right now we're in the process of kind of trying to condition it. These historical buildings, you know, the library, they're old. A couple of the rooms were very neglected, but when I say original, one of the rooms, actually all four of the main rooms are the original paint and the stenciling and the wood. They had a sawmill on the property that actually built the house. So there was a blacksmith shop and a sawmill on the property. It's beautiful, but right now it's under a little bit of work, but we're going to start, we'll be open for investigations. I have a date in February. And then we have like a June celebration, and there will be something happening there every month. So you're welcome to check it out. So I know my time is coming up. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a comment. The second you started talking about the Conjuring House, I instantly got a headache.
Have you been there?
I have not been there physically, but there are too many things that happen with that it's just kind of there.
It's a very interesting house. Has a new owner that has put a lot of work into the property. And I believe, have you been since at all? I think it's calmed down quite a bit.
There's these two new people.
We had the lights flicker. You didn't tell me the library was the most active room when I chose to sleep there. You guys had the lights were flickering,
Yeah.
and then after I went to bed, the lights were flickering, so I shut the lights off. Then my blankets started moving, and I told them, please leave me alone, don't make me say giraffes, and
I just want to
they
sleep.
stopped.
Did the one book fall off the shelf that always falls off the shelf?
No, it hasn't, I don't think
So
for
there's that
anybody.
one book
There's
that
one book they
always
said,
falls
yeah.
off the shelf.
Well, I might go for New Year's, Monique and Sam, doing an event there.
Yeah,
So
so
there's,
they'll have.
These new.
I'm just curious, whenever I watch or hear about the paranormal or the spiritual side, there never seems to be, and I'm agnostic, a reference to the supreme being or anything like that. So it sounds like a kind of scary place to go where you're running into all these things. And isn't anybody watching out for someone who may be on a spiritual path? Have any of your communicants ever suggested that they are on their way to a divine being?
You mean the spirits that are there?
Yes.
Yes. So, the easiest way that I could probably explain that would be, we all here have strong belief systems. It's part of what makes you you. Those belief systems can hold people back from moving on. And a lot of it can be, if you were taught, and I'm hoping I'm not going to be disrespectful here, but if you were taught that if you did bad things, you were going to go to hell. So then when you pass, if you really, really, really believe that, and your emotion is so strong in that, then you're going to be afraid to move on from where you are, because you're thinking, if I go to that area, I'm going to go to hell. Some of our communication isn't always just about, okay, is it a female here? Is it a male? In that house that I showed you in Fitchburg, the grandfather there, I asked him specific questions of, can you see the light? Can you see where you're supposed to go? And he would say, yes. Do you want to go there? No. He was a very violent man and he had fear. Some of the interactions, and I can't speak for all fellow paranormal people, but for myself, I feel that part of us acknowledging them and having them share their stories and talking to them about why they're there, there's a part of them that's healing. That's part of their healing process of letting go of that life so that they can transcend higher in spirit and go back to source.
Kind of like the idea of a purgatory. I was-
Exactly.
You know, I was
Exactly.
Roman Catholic, so, you know, I've got all the usual heebie-jeebies from not believing anything.
Well, it's true. One of the things that was difficult for me is another time, I had to help a priest move on. At the Aldworth Manor in Harrisville, it's now this beautiful wedding place. But when I first came there, when it was like a shell of a place and they had bought it, there at one particular point, there were many, I don't remember what it was, but there was a home for boys. It was a religious kind of place for boys. And there is this male spirit that was a priest that was a bad man. And he was very much staying and afraid to move on. And I'll be honest with you, I remember saying to him exactly, are you telling me that you don't even believe the bullshit that you have been preaching? I mean, here you are in spirit and you can't figure out where to go. Sorry, but I was kind of okay. But his beliefs were holding him to not trust that there's something higher. I believe that as you let go of that, I think that every human being has a beautiful soul. I think that maybe there are some people that are born evil, but I think that you have to think of your physical life. That's not all that you are. It's just what you're living right now. Your soul is so separate than your physical body. So I think that that's part of their letting go. And there are definitely spirits, like, I mean, I will use, I can't think of off the top of my head, but I've met spirits that the more that I've talked to them, the more that we've communicated, the lighter they become. Their whole energy becomes lighter. It's like, they forgive themselves. And I think that's part of it, is they forgive themselves for whatever choices they made. I mean, we all have, when you think about, you have an argument with somebody, and probably everybody here has had an argument, and you go over it over and over, and the amount of energy, someone wrongs you or you have miscommunications, you know how much energy that you hold yourself to that experience. So think of it like amplified when you pass. And if you're holding on to things, you've just created yourself this bubble. So, yeah. And we try in the field too, to just work with people's belief systems. All of our investigations are for everyone. Doesn't matter what your beliefs are. We're kind of like all there to understand and to learn.
I don't mean to monopolize, but one question. In theological terms, Thomas Aquinas said everyone had a guardian angel, and we were grown up to make room on our desk for our little guardian angel, and they'd wake us up.
Which school did you go to?
St. Mary's. And
So you probably got whacked a few times too.
I did. I got a rule over the stomach and that kind of thing. So I'm not in love with those people. But I'm just curious, is there a thought process where, we actually do have angels?
I believe we do.
Okay.
I believe we do. I believe we have spirit. I mean, I know we have spirit guides that are with us, and I know that we have higher beings that are also. Where they come from and exactly the category of what they are or the definition, same thing, can be different. Some cultures, it was certain religions were taught because people could understand that at the time. So the full definition, I don't know, but I do know that they exist.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Thank you, Karen.
Oh.
The library is gonna be closing in 15 minutes, so I think we need to
Yes.
wrap it up.
So I am on Facebook a lot. Take my cards. I have them up here. If you have questions, you can always reach out to me.
Thank you very much.
But thank you very much.